Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, stories and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out the articles, videos and more at passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered and contribute to the community forum, and of course, attend the weekly online Global Passive House Happy Hour. Now, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand.
And I'm Zach Semke in Seattle.
How things are going in Seattle, Zach?
They're good. I just had a really fun trip. I went to New York City and back for the NAPHN conference, Passive House for All. So I'm still buzzing from that. It was really great.
Such a great opportunity to be back in real events. I too was at a Passive House event on this last weekend. We had the New Zealand Passive House Hui, which is a meeting. It's actually grown. It's almost like a mini conference now. We had about 120 people in Wellington, and nice. Some really cool stuff. Other people taking interest, including Research Institution Association and one of our big providers of social housing as well. So, exciting stuff. Well, we've got an interview that I did with Kylie Mills this week. Kylie's from the Passive House Association in Australia. But before we get into that, we've got some great people to thank for helping to bring us the Passive House podcast.
We do indeed. Our sponsors make all of this work possible. So a big thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingui Architects, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minitaire All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, RDH Building Science, Rockwool North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Our champion sponsor is SIGA, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy and Research Development Authority. So thank you to all of those sponsors for their support.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. All right, Kylie Mills. Kylie knows her way around a building site. She got to know that from a pretty young age. She helped her dad, who was a builder, and by doing that, she gained a bit of experience, but also some inspiration. And despite her family, as she says, wasn't coming from an academic background, and she actually missed out on getting into architecture school the first time round, but she persevered and trained, and she went on to become a registered architect in Australia. And she now enjoys teaching at a number of institutions. She runs her own firm, BluKube Architecture in Sydney, and she is also the education director on the board of the Passive House Association of Australia. So she's very busy and she's also very inspiring. So here is my chat with Kylie Mills. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Kylie. Really appreciate you being here. Let's go back to how you got into architecture in the first place. Where did that come about?
Oh, we're going back a few years.
Absolutely.
I got interested in architecture primarily because my father was a builder, and I spent a lot of my vacation periods helping him on site, sort of doing a bit of labouring, doing a bit of cleaning, a bit of everything really, moving brick, holding up the other end of stuff while I was being fixed in gables, all of it. So yes, and then one day he sort of said, well, you never know, you might end up with a incentive to sort of keep doing this. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, we've been looking at a car for you. So I kept working, and then I had to pay back this car that they got me once I got my license. And for a long time after that, I was very interested in architecture. And I thought, right, I want to apply for architecture. And unfortunately, nobody in my family sort of knew anything about the tertiary system. And I thought, right, well, I'll apply. And I just missed out getting into architecture. And I was very, very, very sad about that. And my parents sort of turned around in the end and said, right, well, pick yourself up off the ground, go get a job, and go and roll in TAFE. And I did. All in 1 week, my entire life changed. And I ended up studying part-time drafting for 4.5 years. And once I finished that, I still wanted to be an architect. So I enrolled at university. And that was my journey of, really starting architecture. And I didn't have to do first year, which was really interesting because I'd done reasonably well at drafting. So they gave me some credit.
After 4 years of training already.
They gave me some time off because I worked full-time in the industry, so it was definitely part-time.
Absolutely.
So the journey then started I said, I can't do this study part-time. I'm going to have to, do it full-time. So my partner and I agreed, and I went and studied full-time architecture for a couple of years in Canberra. And I had two degrees out of studying architecture then. I had my Bachelor of Environmental Science, of which I had some really inspiring lecturers that talked about sustainability and lots of, really got me into this sort of direction of what I wanted to do. And then I transferred to come up to UNSW, or applied to, and hoping that I would get in because my partner got a job up here, so it was in Sydney. So I was very fortunate that happened. I was able to transfer and we moved up to Sydney and life changed again. So that was a bit of a culture shock, not only just coming from, my parents had moved to a village in Canberra. So I'd gone from this really 9-street village to Sydney, which was just a big shock for me, but exciting all the same, and university. And in the end, I ended up working part-time and studying full-time, which is an interesting sort of scenario, but much more manageable than the other way around, especially when you look at architecture.
You mentioned that you did a double qualification, a double degree, so Bachelor of Science.
Bachelor of Science, yes. So I in the built environment, so that was through the University of Canberra. And to then change states, I literally had to enrol in another university, which meant I then had to apply to do the Bachelor of Architecture. And at the time, there wasn't a Masters of Architecture, it was just architecture. So you'd have had to have gone all the way through UNSW, and all you would have got was a Bachelor of Architecture. And now they've since made the Australian courses up to date with international courses, so you end up with a Masters of Architecture, of which then you can go and do your practical experience, do your professional exams and do your logbook and become a registered architect, which I did.
Now that teaching and academic side is something you know quite a lot about, which we'll come to, but I want to pick up on what you said about the inspiration that you got from doing the Bachelor of Science course. Did you find that was just in that course? Was there anything like that? I'm guessing that's around the environmental side, sustainability. Was that part of the architecture course, or was it only in the...
It was, and it was one of the design classes. And ironically enough, probably about 8 years ago, I was sort of standing in the bookshop, which you do as an architect, and look at all the lovely expensive books. And I picked up one and thought, oh, this is fantastic. And at the time, I didn't have my glasses with me, but I sort of thought, I'm going to buy it. I could read enough that I was interested, got it home and looked at the author, and it was the lecturer from University in Canberra that actually inspired me.
Wow.
So I thought, oh, that's a keeper.
That's cool. That'll be some good brownie points when you turn up to the next lecture and say, I bought your book.
Well, I did actually mention it to her. I became friends on LinkedIn with her, so it was nice. Years later.
Nice.
It's nice to come back and do that type of thing and connect with people. And it's just a nice journey. And from there on, I was working as an architect. I was able to practice as an architect. I worked for different councils and things. My journey took quite some time. I often say that when I do a bit of teaching, I sort of say to my students, there is many pathways to achieve your goal. It took me 17 years in total, and they look at me wide-eyed. I said, no, toss in a couple of children as well.
Yeah. That's good advice. So what did that sustainability component look like in your architecture training?
Well, it really probably focused on the time more about the passive solar aspects and design in that respect. There wasn't a huge amount of thermodynamics or anything. You were made aware of everything there. And because it was sort of an undergraduate degree, we were introduced to a lot of things, and it really whet my appetite for wanting to know more. And I never really quite got the rest of it till many years later. So it kind of made sense to sort of keep pursuing it. And that's pretty much what I've been doing. I've been sort of aiming to do sustainable design. I got involved with a number of different things along the way. And so my journey to discover Passive House was sort of, kind of quite a long one.
And it sounds like that wouldn't necessarily automatically be the case for your colleagues and your peers. If they learn a little bit of that stuff, but it's not really required part of the practice. How do most students sort of get dumped out at the end of their architecture training?
Oh, that depends on what they choose as electives. you could
Right.
Specialise in various areas in architecture, and you could come out with a very broad sort of sense of understanding about a lot of things, or you could really narrow it down, and then you could go and study some more. Obviously, it's a great process. It's enlightening. I thought, right, I'll go and become an architect, and then I came out thinking, wow, there's so many more choices. That really wasn't what I expected.
And so what did you do straight out? Because you've done quite a bit of teaching, right?
I have done a lot of teaching sort of since about 2000 and I'm trying to think now, 2005. In building design and architectural technology, those type of things. So it was almost like the giving back. And surprisingly, I really enjoyed it, being able to hear and learn and watch and observe as students grew. And I had the opportunity to do some university tutoring as well, and I'm still doing that, which is more of a more recent adventure, and that's been really exciting. That's really inspired me again to understand why I chose the profession, and
Right.
it really has sort of brought back all of those feelings of why I do what I do, and it's fun. It's hard work sometimes, but yes, definitely fun.
When did you first hear about Passive House? Do you remember when you first came across it?
I do. I was, unfortunately, at the time, I was actually looking for CPD, so some continuing professional development, because I'd been in a car accident and I'd been sitting on the sofa and I'd sort of looked at what I had to do in recovery and thinking, oh, I've got to do my CPD. I don't have enough formal hours. What am I going to do? And I sat and looked through the internet and thought I could just do a course and it would all be covered, all in one hit. So I just went on this hunt, and I wanted something to do with sustainability. And I actually came across Susan's from Box Hill TAFE, her paper that she actually wrote as part of I think she actually received a sort of an internal scholarship with TAFE as a teacher. And she got to go out and investigate a topic of her choice, which was all about Passive House. And I read her paper and I thought, this is what I want to do. And I thought, where can I learn more about this Passive House? And it was Box Hill TAFE. So I sort of said, I informed the family this is what I wanted to do, and told them that it was 2 weeks. I was going to go down to Melbourne for 2 weeks, and they went, which meant that they had to eat their father's cooking for a couple of weeks. The kids were so happy. But in saying all that, it was definitely well worth it. And I came back to Sydney and said, right, well, why don't we have this course here? And sort of kept pursuing that. And in the end, I ended up getting the first course, a Passive House course running in Sydney as well, which was fantastic.
Wow.
Cara came over from New Zealand, did that for us, which was great.
Yeah, because that's not a small thing to not have a course running in a location and then get one up and running, is it? Because you need someone who's experienced. It's an official course. So you need some official nod from
Yep.
the institute, and then all the normal logistics of organising a course. Were you aware of a demand already for it? Were you confident that you'd find enough people willing to make it worthwhile?
I had a really long list of people that were interested. The problem is that when we got down to it, it was actually how many of the people on that list could commit to 2 weeks off work. And that got really hard. And that's been some of the things that people have noticed, that you have to really commit. And if you're going to take 2 weeks off work, being a small business, it can really impact, obviously, their income and how things work for them. And it is a big choice. And I was so glad I did it. I was able to do it. And in a break, I was able to, I was in a recovery sort of time. I had a couple of really excellent clients at the time that sort of understood that I was going to do this. I would still be contactable, and their projects didn't come to a grinding halt, which was wonderful, even though they were in Sydney and I was in Melbourne.
Right.
You make things work when you want to, and it definitely worked. And I think I've just sort of fallen in love with Passive House after that. It was, I've been an advocate for it ever since.
So, have you managed to incorporate Passive House to some of your projects? Have you done some Passive House projects now?
I have, yes. I have had a couple of, projects where we've incorporated as many principles as possible to retrofitting a design isn't always easy. It's actually extremely difficult, and you can only do what you can do when the design's already approved, and you do the best you can there. And when you sort of chat to the client and say, well, if you don't achieve it, this is where you could get it, and you have to be very open about what they can achieve in reality. So I've had some wonderful clients. I've been able to sort of talk to them in real terms, and currently I'm an architect and done the Passive House work for a project in Ballina that we're aiming for certification on, which is super exciting. And then just another one. Yeah, it's been very hard in Sydney to get people to be interested in it and sort of commit. So when you do find somebody, we embrace them.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's very easy to do here, and they don't see the value add, I think, sometimes. But once you sort of talk about what you can do and how much more comfortable a space can be, and in Sydney you don't really need that much heating or cooling if you've got the right type of house, the right orientation. We're very lucky, but we still have buildings with mould in them, and it's, I look at the double brick house I live in and I think, wow, I really want to change it.
Yeah. So when those couple of projects that you've done, are they projects where you've managed to convince a client of going down that path, or are they clients that have come to you because they know a little bit about it and they've chosen you specifically?
I've had one client that knew a lot about it and they came to me, which was great. And that was through the Australian Passive House Association sort of network. And they came to me and they were particularly after somebody that would listen to them, what they wanted. And my other client has actually I've convinced them that it would actually be a wonderful solution, because not only do they have a heritage property, they also have noise issues with aircraft and things like that. So it's going to be an interesting journey to get that one to achieve an NFIT sort of stamp on that one.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, retrofitting is such a challenge. It's one of the hardest things, I would imagine, for both the designer and the builder, to take something existing and retain some of the character, but upgrade the performance of it. It'd be much easier to fold it over and start again.
It would be.
That's a big challenge.
And the best thing is there are a lot more tradespeople starting to train up here, and that's exciting for me. I'm really pleased that there are so many people and tradespeople interested in learning about Passive House, because without them, being a designer just doesn't, what do you do with that?
Well, yeah, and then because they often become the problem solvers on the ground, particularly for a retrofit, right?
100%. 100%. And if there's an issue, you've got to work through it together. You've got to make sure things work and analyse everything as you go. And often you don't know what a building's like till you've opened it up in some cases, which might change all the calculations that you've done one way or another. So, yeah, and a redesign may be needed. It's, just being mindful of all of those things and the reality of what might happen.
How valuable was your time spent with your dad on building site?
Oh, I lost my parents when I was quite young, so valuable, invaluable. You couldn't put a price on it. It taught me a lot about the characters that come on site, the unusual names some of them might even have.
Yeah.
And,
They all end in O in Australia, don't they? Steve O and Dame O.
well, I could tell you some stories on that. No, I won't go there. But they're being able to talk to all of those people as well, and going onto a building site now as an architect, often, I've had some interesting people. I've done some virtual on-site meetings as well, where I've had, I've never spoken to an architect before, and I'm thinking, right, so this must be extra weird because not only am I an architect, I'm also female. So I still get a little bit of that.
Yeah.
It's unusual, but
right.
I manage it. It's all good. And if there's an issue or problems that we have to solve, I talk through it with people there. It's much easier to work with them.
So is that a problem in the industry still? Is there discrimination, do you think?
Oh, is there discrimination? Probably. I try not to notice it. It's something I've always been, that one girl in tech drawing. You think, oh, okay, I'm the only girl in tech drawing. Wonderful. So that's, back the old manual hand drawing stuff. So that was high school experiences for me. It's not anything new. I imagine there's still a little bit of that out there, and it just does depend on the topic or the trade. And, you don't see too many female concrete layers, that type of thing. It's, I've seen tilers that are female. I've air tightness barrier installers that are female. There's a good range of people out there now. It's exciting, and it's nice to talk to them and share their experiences as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's by no means any shortage now of very experienced and qualified, knowledgeable women designers, architects, and a few tradespeople as well around the industry. Do you think just not even thinking about it is probably a good strategy? So you're turning up to site as an architect, not as a woman, not as anything other than just there to do the job that you're there to do, and with all the experience and knowledge that you have.
Pretty much that's what happens now, yes. It's probably well summarised, Matthew.
Tell me about your other role, because you've got quite a lot going on. You're running BluKube Architecture, which is that's been your company for quite a while, but you're also, are you still teaching?
I am still teaching, yes. So I do that casually, and I teach at Enmore TAFE, which is the design centre. It's usually construction topics, and they are primarily interior designers. And they like the idea that a female can be teaching other, primarily female, people about construction. So it's not unusual, but you do have to understand how things stay up and why your walls have to be built a certain way to carry the things that you hang off them, and ceilings.
Yep.
And often it's intriguing for them to say, oh, so that's why we do it. Yeah.
So thinking about the structural and the technical aspects, not just the colours and the finishing.
Yeah, they do. Interior designers do have to have some basic knowledge, which is important. Which, I think it should be essential for anybody in the building industry. And in addition to that, I do some tutoring at Sydney Uni, which is exciting, and that's something that I've sort of embraced again for this semester.
And what's your role at the Australian Passive House Association?
I've had a few roles there with the Australian Passive House Association. Initially, I was back when I first started and I got involved, I was the New South Wales representative. And that's when I sort of got the course up and running in Sydney, and that type of thing, and organised a number of different events. So that was a great introduction. And at that time, I sort of thought, I'll put my hand up and throw my hat into the ring to see whether, I could join the board, see whether I can make a difference that way. And I was elected by the members, so that was super exciting. And I've been there for a little while now. I got re-elected. I'm trying to think, it was the last year or the year before that. I think it was the year before that. So I was secretary for a year. I had a very long title for a while. About 2 years ago, I was the education, events and marketing lead. And I thought, that's 3 different positions. And
right.
I explained to them, I said, look, we need somebody to actually take care of each one of these.
Need more people.
So the board re-delegated the task, and it's much easier now. We've got one of each. And it seems to be running a lot smoothly. We're gaining more members. Passive House is starting to make a few more waves in the industry. And I'm hoping people are just building better generally. That would be a nice sort of start.
Yep. So, I mean, as being the person responsible for the education side, I mean, that is exciting that there is so much demand there now. Lots of people wanting to learn, that going that deep dive. Passive House, not just on the design side, but on the construction side, tradesperson. That's pretty promising for the future of Passive House in Australia, right?
100%. It's exciting to know that people want to do better. And once they learn it, they say, why aren't we doing this anyway? It makes a lot of sense. And for me, it was when I did the course, it was like, well, that's the gap that I've had in my education. The curriculum for architecture here doesn't go down into so much detail. And now you can actually pick courses that go into that type of detail. But when I did it, it didn't really have those opportunities. And, there's no engineering sort of side to architecture here. You don't come out with that double degree like in some other countries. You come out with just architecture, and you get maybe a compulsory course where you have to do structural appreciation or something like that of a name, where you look at the structure of different types of buildings and you analyse it, you do some assignments, and then you have to understand that this applies to everything. It's a very unusual way, and it's been a long time since I've done architecture, so sort of specialising in the high performance building side of things now, which is fantastic, and indoor air quality and communications basically.
So there's still a bit of a gap in the traditional architect training around the indoor air quality, the envelope performance, those sorts of aspects.
Is there a gap? I guess it depends on the electives one chooses to have at university and what they would like to focus on when they leave. And
right.
In some respects, I think it's important that people sort of understand that those things sort of have to, sort of blend a little bit.
So, well, perhaps to finish off, give us a bit of your sense of where things are going. What does the future look like for Passive House in Australia?
Hopefully extremely bright. That's my view. I think as people understand that we live in buildings, we work in buildings, we should have these environments that are healthy, because we are we spend 90% of our lives inside, which is crazy, and they need to be healthy, and they're not as healthy as they could be. So as we breathe out, we're creating, atmospheres that would change as we cook, as we, even if it's in an office, we might heat our lunch up in a microwave. All of those things sort of create an atmosphere that may or may not be good for us. And we need to keep these healthy, and, perfumes, all of this sort of stuff contributes to it. So if you've got pets, I think if you've got any sort of health issues, you should be sleeping well at night. You should be able to wake up and feel good about it. Those things are things that we can change, and for the positive. Mm-hmm. So those things are really important to me and for any client, that they come out sort of with an improved way of living, working, all of the above. So with a much better environment, much better sort of way of living every day. So whether it's sleeping, working, those things are important. So COVID sort of, with everybody working from home, they'd have noticed how good or bad their buildings may have been over the last year. And I think there will be some demand for change one way or another.
Yeah. Awesome. Hey, well, thank you for your time, Kylie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Matthew. I appreciate it.
And that was Kylie Mills. She is from BluKube Architecture, her own firm in Sydney, but she's also very active on the Australian Passive House Association and as a teacher at various institutions, as she mentioned. So definitely check out her work, her own work at BluKube, because she's doing some great work there. What did you think of that interview, Zach?
It was great. I really related to the stories about her, growing up on learning from her father. My dad was a builder. I didn't do so much apprenticing with my father, but it was my brother who really did that. So that was, but that kind of early connection with her dad was cool to hear about. And I love the end, the optimism and focus on health at the end. Great conversation.
I forgot to mention at the outset, we talk about TAFE. TAFE is a technical college across Australia. It's Australian-wide, so in New Zealand we would think of that as a polytech, but it's a sort of a trade school. It tends to be a bit more hands-on, vocational, so a lot of people might go, as Kylie did, to go and learn the actual work of technical drawing, and then that allowed her an alternate pathway. It's really interesting. I've got a 14-year-old daughter at the moment, and we are just talking about subject choices for high school, and it's interesting at what stage you kind of need to start directing those decisions for potential options for the future. It's a little bit scary, it's thinking about, do I really have to make those decisions so early? And my message to my daughter is that kind of yes, but also, there, like Kylie says, there are many different routes to get to one outcome, and she chose a route which took a little bit longer perhaps, but she gained up a huge amount of experience along the way, and is doing incredible work now in so many areas. And I really like that idea as an architect, that you can have your day job as an architect, run a company, but also, as she sees it, give back. She sees teaching as giving back, and she really obviously enjoys teaching as much as she does doing her work as an architect.
Right, and that's translated also in her role at the Australian Passive House Association, right? And the leadership role that she's taken there, which is so important. And one of the things that came through in the interview was her seeing that in Sydney, the trades, there are enough people who have been trained in the trades that it's starting to make an impact on her practice. Like it's allowing her to consider retrofits, and that combination both of the training that has been going on for those tradespeople to get to where they are at, as well as her background with her dad on job sites, and her how adept that she's learned to be in communicating with people on site and dealing with different personalities and at times probably some.
I love the idea of a virtual site visit.
Yeah, totally.
I just imagine a builder walking around with an iPad or a phone or something saying, "Is this right?"
Yeah, exactly. The fun new world. So like that education can take many different forms, right? So
yeah, totally. I always like to acknowledge the early adopters, and people like Kylie. They they seem to be very humble about the fact that they say things like, "Oh yeah, we ran the first passive house course in Sydney," and I think it's worth pausing and realizing how big an achievement that is, because we're kind of used to a world now where you just look up some directory and you select a course, and if there's not one that suits your timetable, you go somewhere else and you choose a different course. But they literally created the first course, and they had to find people who were interested. They had in this case earlier in Australia, they actually had to fly Cara Rosemeyer from New Zealand over to Australia to run the course because there was no approved trainer in Australia. And like she said, convincing people to take 2 weeks out of their professional work, often if they're running their own small business, to do this hard course and not know if there's going to be any work directly out of it, and probably wasn't any direct work out of it. There's so many hurdles to get over to set up that first of anything in passive house world, and I think we do take it a little bit for granted. I just really want to acknowledge people who have done those firsts, because they've paved the way for everything else that follows and things that has made life so much easier for us now.
Yeah, it's really true that we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? I mean, and I was thinking about this a lot at the North American Passive House Network conference last week in New York. I became part of this tribe of the passive house community like 11 years ago, and back then it was just single family houses that we were talking about, and the first projects in New York were single family or were small retrofits. And now fast forward to 2021, and we're touring Sendero Verde, which is a massive building in East Harlem. 3 different buildings, actually. One big tower, all passive house. And it's being run by, some of the top builders, construction firms, and subcontractors and architecture firms. I mean, it's a big deal, and that's becoming more so commonplace now. So just in 11 short years, we've seen that happen, and it's because there were those early adopters, like you're saying, who paved the way and made that possible. And a lot of them are the same ones who are running these conferences, But
that's right.
And now I think, so I think that's a reminder, like for practitioners who might be like, oh man, I wish I was getting more of the passive house work, or this is tough to make the step, or, whatever it is, the basic, the normal hardships that we encounter in our days, the kind of courage and leap of faith that people were making 10, 11 years ago, was at a different level of magnitude. Yeah.
Total leap of faith. Yeah. So thank you to all those people who have paved the way, too many to numerous to mention, and here's to all the firsts that have happened, and all the firsts to come. There are still lots of opportunities for doing first projects in certain locations and breaking new barriers in passive house world.
So true.
Very good. All right. We got a few activities coming up in the coming couple of weeks.
We do, yes. So Passive House Accelerator Construction Tech on Tuesday, my time, Wednesday, your time, will feature John Drentz of McGran Associates, and he's going to be talking about compartmentalization. So looking at airtightness between units in multifamily buildings, how to achieve that, how to test for it, the important benefits of compartmentalization, and all of the kind of technique and technology that goes into that. So join us for that. And then on Wednesday, my time, Thursday, your time, Global Passive House Happy Hour will feature the Sri Lanka Passive House Factory that I think people probably have seen articles about, or
wow, such a cool
super
project.
Cool.
That's a headliner.
We've been eagerly anticipating this presentation for quite a while. So this is Jordan Parnas and Dylan Marlowe will be talking about that very exciting passive house project. And then on Thursday, my time, Friday, your time, we have our very special community workshop for the passive house community. And this is both in North America and globally, called Centering Equity in Passive House. So this is going to be co-presented by Astrid County and Johnny Rizvani. And it's a direct outgrowth of the work of the NAACP's Centering Equity in the Sustainable Building Sector. And so this is going to be looking at actionable work that we can do to center equity in our work, to advance equity and inclusion and diversity in our community. And I can't wait for it. It's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on Thursday, June 24th. And we'll have information about that in show notes.
That sounds like a nice follow-up from the Sri Lanka project, because thinking about equity, you think of a factory, a clothing factory somewhere like Sri Lanka, you just immediately think sweatshop. But this project completely turns that around, and I think that's such a great introduction to the wider possibilities of Passive House. I would encourage anyone who's listening to this to grab a friend who's never heard of Passive House and get them to come along and have a listen to that, because I think it's a great way to get introduced into those other benefits of Passive House and the social side and just the community and of course the fact that it's a renovation. It's just such an inspiring project that it'd be awesome for others to get introduced to.
Yeah, definitely. The Centering Equity and Passive House workshop is also a nice follow-on to the conference that NAPHN held, which was called Passive House for All. The NAPHN has been doing lots of work making connections with Black and Indigenous people of color leaders, so BIPOC leaders, and there were a lot of new voices that were featured at the conference itself. So this is now, having, I think, absorbed and learned from those workshop, those presentations at the conference. This workshop is a chance then to take a look at what each one of us can be doing in our own work to center equity.
Awesome. And just a reminder that if people feel overwhelmed by all of that great content and they can't make it to any of those sessions, you can find the recordings of the Tech Tuesday and the Happy Hour and lots of other great resources on the Passive House Accelerator website as well, because I know that for me, I often struggle to sometimes attend the whole event, but there's some amazing stuff there that you can go and check up on later.
Yeah, definitely.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Zach, and thanks to our whole team at the Accelerator. It helps bring these to you each week and pull everything together. And thanks again to wonderful sponsors of the Passive House Accelerator. Couldn't do all this without you guys. So we've got some other great interviews coming up, and we'll be back again next week.